Dr. Jayraj's Literary Lens presents Part 1, After Theory, Lecture 3, Critical Disability Theory. This lecture is prepared and delivered by Dr. S. Joseph Arul Jayraj, former Head and Associate Professor of English, St. Joseph's College Autonomous, Tiruchirappalli, Tamil Nadu, India. Introduction. Disability is often thought of only as a medical problem that lives inside a person's body. Critical disability theory challenges that view. It argues that disability is also shaped by power relations, language, law, and social institutions. Michael Oliver. By looking at disability through a critical lens, similar to how critical race theory looks at race, readers can see how society marginalizes disabled people and how those marginalizations can be resisted. Theory. What is critical disability theory? Critical disability theory is part of a larger movement called disability studies. It argues that disability is not just a personal problem, but a social one. Society often creates barriers like inaccessible buildings, negative attitudes, or poor education systems that make life harder for disabled people. This idea is known as the social model of disability, Tom Shakespeare 12. For example, someone who uses a wheelchair may not be able to enter a building, not because of their disability, but because the building has stairs and no ramp. Critical disability theory also connects disability to other forms of identity and oppression, such as race, gender, class, and sexuality. It asks, how do racism and sexism affect disabled people's lives? How do stories in books reflect these intersecting injustices? As Susan Wendell explains, disability is not just about bodies, it is about power, who has it and who does not. Susan Wendell, 28. The purpose of this talk is to introduce critical disability theory in clear, straightforward language. The talk will 1. Outline the historical roots of critical disability theory. 2. Define its core concepts. 3. Show how scholars apply critical disability theory in research. 4. Summarize major criticisms. 5. Suggest areas for future work. Historical roots of critical disability theory. The social model of disability. The social model, first popularized by Michael Oliver in the 1990s, shifted focus from fixing bodies to changing environments. Michael Oliver. Critical theory. Critical theory originated in the Frankfurt School, aiming to uncover hidden power structures in culture, economics, and politics. Max Horkheimer and Theodor Adorno. It asks who benefits from the way things are and how might we transform them. Merging the two, when scholars combined the social model with critical theory, they created critical disability theory. Tom Shakespeare describes critical disability theory as a framework that interrogates disability as a site of power, identity, and resistance. Tom Shakespeare, 23. Core concepts of critical disability theory. Concept: disability as a social construction. Simple explanation: disability is not just a physical condition, it is made meaningful by cultural ideas and policies. Key source: Garland Thompson. Concept: power and hierarchy. Simple explanation: society creates hierarchies that privilege non-disabled bodies. Key source: Dan Goodley. Concept: intersectionality. Simple explanation: disability interlocks with race, gender, class, sexuality, etc., creating complex experiences of oppression. Key source: Kimberly Crenshaw, Alison Kafer. Concept: narrative and representation. Simple explanation: media and literature shape how people think about disability, often using stereotypes. Key source, Robert Morris. Concept, agency and resistance. Simple explanation. Disabled people can actively challenge oppressive structures through activism, art and scholarship. Key source, James Mann. Concept, embodiment. Simple explanation. The body is a site where social meanings are lived and contested. Key source, Tom Shakespeare. Methodological approaches. Researchers using critical disability theory often employ qualitative methods that give voice to disabled people. Common approaches include narrative inquiry, collecting personal stories to reveal how individuals make sense of disability, Robert Morris. Critical discourse analysis, examining language in policy documents, media or textbooks to uncover hidden biases, Norman Fairclough, Dan Goodley. Participatory action research, working together with disabled participants to identify problems and co-create solutions, James Mann. These methods align with critical disability theory's goal of exposing power relations and fostering social change. Applications of critical disability theory. Education. Critical disability theory helps scholars critique how schools treat disabled students. For example, Goodley argues that curricula often assume a normative learner, marginalizing those who diverge from that norm. Dan Goodley, 45. Researchers have used critical disability theory to redesign inclusive curricula that value diverse ways of learning. Shane Snyder. Policy and law. Critical analyses reveal that legislation sometimes reinforces exclusion. Tom Shakespeare shows how the Disability Discrimination Act in the UK, while progressive, still centres on reasonable adjustments rather than full social redesign. Tom Shakespeare, 31. Media and culture. Critical disability theory uncovers stereotypical portrayals of disability in film and TV. Garland Thompson notes that extraordinary bodies are often depicted as objects of pity or inspiration, thereby limiting public understanding. Garland Thompson, 12. Healthcare. Critical perspectives expose how medical discourse can pathologize disability, ignoring patients' lived experiences. James Mann, 78. Criticisms and debates. 1. Overemphasis on theory. Some critics say critical disability theory is too abstract and neglects practical solutions. John Murray. 2. Risk of victim-oppressor binary. By focusing on oppression, scholars may unintentionally portray disabled people only as victims. Tade Kaufman. 3. Limited global perspective. Most critical disability theory works originate in the North Globe. Scholars call for more inclusion of non-Western contexts. Susan Miller. 4. Intersectionality challenges. While intersectionality is praised, applying it consistently across studies remains difficult. Kimberly Crenshaw. These critiques push critical disability theory to become more grounded, diverse, and reflexive. Future directions. A. Global-comparative studies. Investigate how critical disability theory operates in different cultural and legal settings. B. Digital media analysis. Examine disability representation on social platforms where disabled creators can self-represent. C. Policy co-creation. Involve disabled people directly in drafting laws, moving from reasonable adjustments to radical redesign. D. Interdisciplinary collaboration. Combine critical disability theory with fields like environmental studies to explore disability ecology connections. David J. Burchard.
How is critical disability theory used in literature? Writers and critics use critical disability theory to analyze and create stories that challenge stereotypes and give disabled people more agency. Below are key ways in which critical disability theory appears in the literature. challenging stereotypes of disabled characters. Many classic books show disabled characters in harmful ways, such as victims who need saving, villains who are evil because of their disability, or inspirational figures who overcome all odds. These portrayals can make readers feel pity or fear instead of understanding disabled people as full human beings. Critical disability theory helps readers question these stereotypes. For instance, in Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, the character Tiny Tim is often seen as a symbol of innocence and suffering. While his story raises sympathy, some critical disability theory critics argue that Tiny Tim is too passive and reduced to his illness. David T. Mitchell and Sharon Snyder, 47. His worth seems to come from being good despite his disability, not from his own choices or personality. In contrast, modern works using critical disability theory try to present disabled characters more fully. In The Reason I Jump by Naoki Higashida, a non-speaking autistic teenager, the author shares his inner thoughts and feelings. The book helps readers understand that communication differences do not mean a lack of intelligence or emotion. Naoki Higashida, 9. This kind of literature reflects critical disability theory by centering the disabled person's voice. Reclaiming narratives, disabled authors telling their own stories. A key goal of critical disability theory in literature is to let disabled people tell their own stories. Too often, non-disabled writers create stories about disability without including real disabled voices. Critical disability theory supports autobiographies, memoirs, and fiction written by disabled authors. For example, Alice Wong's Disability Visibility is a collection of essays by disabled people from different backgrounds. The stories talk about pride, resistance, joy, and anger, emotions often left out of mainstream disability stories. Alice Wong, 5. By publishing these narratives, the book fights the idea that disability is only about tragedy or medical treatment. Similarly, in her novel The Country of the Blind, writer and disability activist Laura McKenney reimagines H.G. Wells' original story. While Wells's version shows a sighted man saving a blind society, McKenney's version asks, what if the blind community does not need saving? Her work uses critical disability theory to question who gets to define normal and better. McKenney, rewriting. Showing disability as a part of identity, not a problem to fix. Critical disability theory-informed literature often shows disability as a natural part of human diversity. Instead of focusing on cure or recovery, these stories celebrate disabled lives as they are. Take the young adult novel A Side of Paradise by Rhea Kishore. The main character, Layla, has a chronic illness and uses a wheelchair. But the story is not about fixing her, it's about her friendships, creativity, and dreams. Rhea Kishore, Chapter 5. This approach treats disability as one part of identity, like being a fan of music or someone from a certain culture, not the whole story. Similarly, in poetry, disabled writers like Neil Marcus use humor and honesty to redefine disability. In one poem, Marcus writes, "Disability is not a brave struggle or courage in the face of adversity. Disability is an art, it's an ingenious way to live." Neil Marcus. This kind of expression fits critical disability theory by turning a negative label into a source of pride. Using literary form to reflect disabled experience. Some writers use the style and structure of their writing to reflect disability. For example, fragmented sentences, unusual punctuation, or non-linear timelines can represent how some disabled people think or perceive time. Riva Lera, an artist and writer with spina bifida, uses memoir and visual art together to show how her body and mind interact with the world. Riva Lera, 89.
Her writing doesn't follow a straight path, it jumps between memories, feelings, and social critique. This form mirrors the critical disability theory idea that disabled lives cannot be simplified into one story or solution. Challenges and criticisms. While critical disability theory has improved representation in literature, there are still challenges. Some publishers do not accept books by disabled writers. Some readers resist stories that don't end with a cure or miracle. Also, many books that claim to support disability rights still center non-disabled characters as heroes. Nirmala Eravelis, 12. Moreover, not all disabled people agree on what critical disability theory should do. Some want more stories about fighting for rights, while others want everyday stories where disability is not the main issue. These debates show that disability is not a single identity, but a diverse and complex experience. Conclusion. Critical disability theory offers a powerful way to see disability not merely as a medical fact, but as a socially produced condition shaped by power, language, and culture. By using tools such as narrative inquiry and discourse analysis, researchers can expose hidden biases, promote inclusive practices, and amplify disabled voices. While critical disability theory faces important criticisms, especially regarding its theoretical density and limited global reach, its emphasis on intersectionality and resistance makes it a vital framework for scholars, educators, and policymakers who aim for a more just society. Critical disability theory changes how we read and write stories about disability. Instead of seeing disability as a tragedy or medical problem, critical disability theory asks us to look at how society treats disabled people and whose voices are heard. In literature, this means challenging stereotypes, supporting disabled authors, showing disability as part of identity, and using creative forms to express disabled lives. Through critical disability theory, literature becomes more just and inclusive. It gives students, readers, and writers tools to think critically about representation and imagine a world where everyone, disabled or not, can thrive. Thank you.